This week we're going to continue our work thinking about World War I. We're going to focus on rationing. You're going to be the detective and work out what this word means. First of all, can you think about what you've eaten this week? Have you had any fruit? Any cereal? What about a sandwich? What about spaghetti? What's your favourite thing to eat? Keep that in your mind. We're going to think about that again later. Here's a source from World War I. Now, just because we've been talking about food doesn't mean I'm talking about ketchup. No, I'm talking about a primary or secondary source, something that gives us information about the past. What do you think this tells us about World War I? The kitchen is the key to victory. It's asking people to eat less bread. What do you think that's trying to tell you? What is it trying to persuade people to do? And I wonder why this was necessary. Here's another example of a historical source. What do you think this source is trying to tell you? And what about this one? It has people's names on it. And it says Ministry of Food. What do you think these sources are trying to tell us? What do they have to do with rationing? Well, during World War I, a lot of Britain's key ingredients were imported into the country using boats. These ingredients included things like wheat, which we needed to make bread, and tea and sugar. Britain's enemies, such as Germany, worked out that they could bomb these boats and sink the ingredients. This would cut off essential supplies to the country. This meant there wasn't enough food for everybody in the country. The food that was available was very expensive, so poorer people couldn't afford it. People did try to grow their own fruit and vegetables, but this took time. Because there was no wheat, there was less bread, and it had to be shared. Posters such as the one we looked at the beginning of our video encouraged people to eat less bread so they could share it. People were given recipe books to encourage them to make use of the ingredients they did have and try new variations of meals. By January 1918, rationing was introduced. This meant everybody was given a fair share of all of the food and ingredients that were available. This included the rich as well as the poor. Everybody got quite a small allowance of food, but it meant that there was enough to go around and people were no longer starving. Rationed foods included bacon and ham, meat, jam, margarine, and butter. Sugar was also rationed. Now remember, things like margarine and sugar were needed to baking. Now people needed to think carefully about what they wanted to use their rations on. Adults had a ration of tea, but not children. Cooking fat was rationed too, and people had to use creative ways to make it last. Cheese was included on the list. And so were sweets too. Can you imagine only having a few sweets to last you all that time? Rations of egg included a real egg, plus some powdered egg. And even milk was rationed too. Although many foods were not officially rationed, they were in very short supply, simply because they were imported into the country. This would have been very difficult or not possible during the war. Some foods were never rationed, such as fresh fruit and vegetables, although they were not readily available either. Bread was never officially rationed, but without the wheat that was needed to make it, they had to make it with an alternative ingredient. Not many people liked it. Fish was never rationed, although it was very expensive. Which menu do you think you would prefer? How you eat now, or a rationed menu? Some people might say that the wartime menu was healthier. People did generally eat more healthier during the war because their portions were smaller. Also, due to the lack of availability of many foods, they had to eat a lot of fresh foods, such as freshly grown fruits and vegetables. Some people might think that the wartime food was more varied. Because they had less ingredients, they had to be very creative with the food that they made. They had to try new things and play with the ingredients. So maybe rationing wasn't all that bad after all. So if you ever hear your mum or your gran or your granddad saying waste not, want not, now you know where the phrase has come from. During the war, when food was rationed, nobody wasted a single bite.